What's up, folks? This is the first podcast for this channel. I'm joined today by Housecat. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Housecat. I'm a musician. I've done some work for your channel, I guess, and I just put out an album, The Gallery, and that's about it.
All right. Yeah, no, I'm sure some of you are familiar. I've been using a lot of his songs to kind of give that sort of jazzy Charlie Brown feeling to my poorly animated videos.
Nice.
So today our topic is going to revolve around time. And so in that, we're going to kind of talk about memory, regrets, aging, death probably. And we're going to use two main pieces of work. One, the Charlie Kaufman movie, I'm Thinking of Ending Things, which I have subjected to my family, my friends, my girlfriend. I'm sorry about that. It's an incredibly depressing movie, but I really liked it. And apologies if you didn't, if you haven't seen it and you feel left out. We're going to try to give an overview, and we're also going to talk about Caretaker. What's the name of the album? It's
Everywhere at the End of Time.
Okay. Yep. And that is a very interesting project that also kind of revolves around the theme of dementia.
It's a dementia simulator.
Yes. I don't know if I would actually advise you to listen to it, especially in full, but it's an interesting piece of work. So we're gonna dive into both of those. This video is brought to you by the Ridge Wallet. It's light, sleek, and industrial. It doesn't fold or awkwardly bulge in your back pocket, and it seriously changed my whole pocket situation. Most people are still using wallets designed in the 90s, carrying around old receipts, pictures of their ex, and gift cards in an unorganized mess. Not the Ridge Wallet, though. This wallet holds up to 12 cards, plus room for cash, and there's over 30 colors and styles, including carbon fiber and burnt titanium. The durable material means each wallet comes with a lifetime warranty. You could buy this one wallet and carry it for life. If this wasn't enough to win you over yet, check out their 30,000 5-star reviews. The Ridge team is so confident that you'll like it that they'll let you test drive it for 45 days. You can send it back for a full refund if you don't love it. Get 10% off today with free worldwide shipping and returns by going to ridge.com/Sisyphus. That's ridge.com/Sisyphus and use code Sisyphus. Link in description. So I think to begin, it's appropriate to mention that you recently had your birthday.
Sure, yeah.
Yes. Birthdays generally kind of decrease in enjoyment when you get older.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to that because I remember being a kid, like I would be excited for my birthday like a month, 2 months before, just waiting for presents to see people. Just because, I don't know, that day was always, people made a big deal of it. And you get older, and like this last birthday I had, I forgot about it until like 2 days before. And there's also this like, somehow, I'm not sure if other people can relate with this, but there's like this kind of, you get irritated when people try to make like a big deal out of your birthday when you get older. It makes you feel kind of like immature in a way. I'm not sure, but there's definitely like a decline in excitement.
I mean, my guess is that there's kind of, I mean, obviously it's always just kind of, once you become aware of the fact that you are a impermanent organism on Earth, it kind of sucks that every year you're basically counting down when that becomes more and more of a reality.
Yeah. Well, sorry. I like when I was in grade 9, I got really interested in existentialism, and like some people could consider that a dark subject to put a 9th grader through, or put them through some kind of mental crisis. But I found it very interesting and pretty enlightening. It actually cheered me up in a way, but it didn't distract me, or I guess it didn't make me think about like my own mortality. It made me kind of skim on that, but I never really indulged in that. And then once I kind of got older, the weight of that got stronger, the weight of what kind of existentialism is, of understanding that, it is impermanent.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And that kind of also resolves maybe the other reason why we kind of feel less happy about turning another year, becoming older.
Yeah.
That there's kind of a sudden responsibility put on you, that you're kind of loosening your ties with all of these things that previously were very concrete. Like if you had some sort of responsibilities as like a member of a sports team, or just a member of your family, or as a student in high school, that you're kind of becoming more and more free.
Yeah. Well, it's also just strange that, at least in my experience, that weight that I was talking about of like knowing your existence, it almost doesn't feel like it's at the front of your brain. Like it feels you feel like on my birthday I felt quite emotional, kind of down, and it didn't feel like what was causing that was at like the front of my brain. Like I knew what it was. It felt like it was kind of hidden back, and I think that's just that weight kind of coming to light. Like it's just part of that process of growing up.
And do you have any sort of insight into how people might deal with this whole, I mean, it's usually framed as a coming of age story, where people kind of realize that they have to take control of their destiny, that they have to take responsibility of their lives. Do you have any sort of idea of or advice of people kind of going through that? Because you, in a sense, at your age, are kind of going through the same process.
Yeah. I think probably one of the most important things that I've noticed just in my life, I've been very fortunate to grow up with like amazing parents, a great brother, lots of great friends, in a great place. And like I just know that did help make me the person I am and where I am right now. And I think that for anyone kind of in this stage of learning that they're getting more free and they're becoming more responsible for their life and for just a lot more things, is just it takes place before that. It takes place at who your models were when you were growing up, and the people you looked up to, and the people that took care of you. I think it starts there for sure. But advice is just also accept that it's it's a process that pretty much everyone goes through. And you may enter the world, not know what you're doing, and you can take it at that and kind of beat yourself up, or you can take a look at how many other people have entered the world and still don't know what they're doing, or still don't know what they want to do.
No, that's a really good point. It reminds me of a video that I just did recently on the developmental psychologist James Marsh's theory of identity status. And he based it off of Erik Erikson's psychosocial developmental theory. And it specifically revolves around these kind of 4 progressions of identity that most people, he assumes, goes through, and that he found in his studies. There's both or all of them are focused on the variables of exploration and commitment. So for closed, the first one is people that are very committed to things, but they don't explore anything. So you can imagine someone kind of being brought up in a strict household, being told what to do, and they kind of live their whole life with those values. They never judge them, criticize them. The problem with this identity is that it's very susceptible to identity diffusion, the next stage, which is kind of in identity crisis in a way, where suddenly all of these values, because they were so rigid, and the world is very full of change, and you basically have to be kind of flexible if you want to have any sort of identity in the world. If it's too firm, it can break. So, I mean, most clinical patients usually go through some sort of identity diffusion stage where they're neither exploring or committing to anything. This stage usually is characterized by anxiety, kind of a social detachment. They're not really encouraged to do anything. They're not very motivated. Most therapists would recommend to kind of go into a sort of moratorium, where this is the 3rd stage, and it's characterized by exploration and no commitment. So, and this is better than the previous two stages because the individual is still, they're sorting out their identity, they're doing things, and they're keeping an open mind, and they have a higher chance of kind of tapping into certain commitments that actually make them feel fulfilled and give them meaning. And this kind of leads to, if the exploration is successful, a identity achievement status, where you're both exploring things still, but you're also committed to certain things. So you keep kind of an open mind about the world, but you still have certain things that you definitely value in life. And your point is kind of that there's people in completely different stages of identity formation, and that's important to keep in mind.
Yeah, and like one just throughout their life, like many people can, they can never progress, or some people it takes them until maybe they're 40, 50 for something to click. Like, but what you were saying, like, it just reminds me of the many factors that kind of go into this process. Like I was saying about, your parents and who takes care of you and who you're with when you're little. It's like people should not take all of the responsibility for, I guess, like that process. But as it's brought up in I'm Thinking of Ending Things, they're talking about how, like, you can't necessarily blame your mother for everything that happened to you because she also had things that happened to her from her mother and all that. Like, it's kind of just the factors are not completely your responsibility, but it's I kind of forgot.
Yeah, no. Well, I mean, this is probably a good part to start talking about that movie.
Yeah.
Because it does deal a lot with kind of taking responsibility for your it deals a lot with taking responsibility for your life and kind of regrets and taking wrong turns, and to what extent does the environment play a role, and to what extent do you actually have free will over it. I think I should give a little spoiler alert before I just summarize the movie, which is a very hard movie to summarize.
I feel like sorry to cut you off, but I went into the movie with you. You told me a little bit about the plot, not everything, but I found that pretty useful because the film can seem quite abstract.
Right.
Yeah. So I think it's good that you should give people like a good overview.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, I'll try. I mean, it's a Charlie Kaufman movie, so it's very hard to summarize, and he leaves a lot of open windows. I think there's the Community episode where Shirley goes, "Damn Charlie Kaufman." Some people got work in the morning, so I'm not going to spend a really long time trying to figure out all of like the weird little vague symbolism. Yeah. But the kind of main plot is it opens and there's this girl, and she's basically telling you, "I'm thinking of ending things," and she's referring to a relationship she has with this guy named Jake. Well, this is going on. This sort of internal conflict of whether or not she should break up with him. They're also driving to meet Jake's parents for the first time.
Lovely people.
Yeah. And you start to notice kind of weird little things. Like, she'll look directly at the camera while they're driving. She'll kind of her name is very, you don't really know what her name is. It changes. Her clothes are changing.
Yeah, the colors of her dress keep changing.
Her career is completely different in different scenes. Like, she's a poet, she's a physicist, she's an artist, she's a bunch of, so you don't know if this is a concrete person. And while this is playing out, they're showing these random kind of clips of a janitor doing his daily duties at a high school, just mopping, and you can tell that some of the kids are like looking at him in a very mocking way. He's portrayed as very kind of pathetic and kind of sad and lonely. And so that's kind of just the general sort of format of the movie. Mm-hmm. And then when they get to the parents' house, the parents are constantly they're getting older with every scene. Mm-hmm. And also the dialogue becomes very kind of claustrophobic. They're constantly correcting each other at very rapid pace. And then also the whole story of how Jake and this girl met changes constantly. Yeah. And you're also very confused because the girl isn't really reacting in a normal way to any of these things. So you start to question whether she's real. And then she's also getting phone calls. And it looks like they're phone calls from herself that are these kind of weird, almost suicidal ruminations.
Yeah.
And she's not reacting very strongly towards them at all. And then they end up having a very long car ride back where they discuss movies. They discuss, I think, what you just previously talked about, the kind of to what extent do we blame our parents for our current behavior. Yeah. We see Jake get into a very kind of suicidal rant at one point and then quickly wants to go and get ice cream.
Yeah, that was
in the middle of a blizzard. And then they get ice cream. It's kind of a surreal moment. It's very hard to summarize all of this because each scene is just it's a wealth of symbols, and so I'm just giving a very, very broad overview. They end up in the high school, and you start to realize that Jake is the janitor in the high school, and they end up in the high school because Jake wants to just throw out his like ice cream cups.
Yeah,
and so there's this weird sort of where she's in the high school and the janitor sees her and seems to make sort of amends.
Yeah.
And she has a brilliant kind of revelation where she says, I don't even know who Jake is. I barely saw him. It turns out they never talked. You start to realize that everything going on in the movie is going on in the janitor's head. And this is sort of his kind of playthrough of this sort of fantasy of what could have been with this girl if he ended up talking to her. And him placing her, this kind of idealized woman, in different periods of his life and his parents' life, and with different careers, different stories of how they met. And then at the same time that this fantasy's playing out, there's these sort of suicidal ruminations, and you come to realize that the title I'm Thinking of Ending Things doesn't just revolve around I'm thinking of ending the relationship. It's also revolving around the janitor contemplating killing himself.
Yeah.
In Charlie Kaufman fashion, you don't really... I mean, the janitor, he appears to suffer from some sort of paradoxical undressing in his car. It seems to be that he dies of hypothermia at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The ending is, I'd say it's for everyone's mind to decide. It's not really I'm not sure what to say about it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's there is a very, and this fits into our whole discussion of time and regret and everything, but there's this very kind of main message, I think, that is this janitor is so trapped in his own sort of fantasies and everything, in this sort of very rigid sense of how the world is, and he's kind of constructed this whole world through movies and books he's read and poems. And, you know, he seems to be very well read, but he's also trapped himself in it with all of these ideas. And I mean, it goes back to the very start where the girl says ideas are just as good as action. That, you know, they pretty much compose the world around us. And that's right to a certain degree. But, you know, by the end, you realize that this guy really hasn't done anything with his life. And it almost feels like a bit of a warning.
I don't know. It's just the whole way it's done is so just amazing, in my opinion, that there's just this whole story that you kind of get sucked into, but also kind of leave one foot out because you're not quite sure what's going on. And it just all goes back to the janitor's head.
Yeah, no, I got obsessed with it. The first time I watched it, I didn't really understand what was going on. And then I read about like what was actually, and it's based off of a book that has a more kind of explicit sort of wrapping up of the story where the janitor does kill himself in a very graphic fashion in the high school. Whereas Kaufman kind of left it up to interpretation. But I was blown away by the sort of, I guess it's a bit of like a Fight Club twist. Yeah. And it's not like a twist where like you kind of go, whoa, and then you kind of go, oh, because it's very sad. It's, you know, there's all of the characters in the movie that are presented to us are actually just various kind of caricatures that this guy has created in his mind. And it also makes you reflect that a lot of the people that you think of, and maybe the way that you even interact with people, you're interacting with the caricatures of these people that we know. None of us really have honest images of other people. We just have our own ideas of them, and that's what we're interacting with.
Yeah. Something that I think is worth bringing up is during the part when she's a painter, they're talking with Jake's parents, and they're talking about the idea that how can a painting show emotion or feeling if it doesn't have a face or a person in it? And what I find so amazing about that bit of dialogue is the film itself, even if you don't understand it while you're watching it, kind of seeps into your brain. And like the next day I felt like shit. Like I was not feeling too good. And I just think like that film somehow created not just one emotion, but like a bunch, without you really even noticing. Mm-hmm. Like it's crazy.
Yeah. Well, there's a dance sequence where, and it's supposed to, and I thought it was kind of pretentious the first time I saw it, and then I realized that it was choreography from Oklahoma the musical. Yeah. That was the play that this janitor would have seen rehearsed every like 3 weeks or something at this high school. So it's once again playing into this whole everything that you see in the movie is in this guy's head, constructed by his environment. And it's a very beautiful dance scene, and it's this kind of young, handsome version of Jake dancing with with the girl, and you see kind of how he thought his life would play out with her. They would fall in love, they would get married, and then you see the janitor come in, and he stabs this younger version of Jake to death. In this dance, it is a very like theatrical looking dance scene, and you're seeing how he thinks of himself. He sees his older self, who's, he says, taken so many wrong turns and lives with so much regret. He sees him as the villain to his life. He sees himself as a villain. He's filled with so much hatred, and that's very sad. And then to see that he kind of cleans up the act as a janitor at the very end with his mop. Yeah,
it's just tragic.
Yeah, no, well, and to kind of bring it back to aging, there's a very sort of explicit image of that with the parents.
Yeah.
There's you see Jake's parents literally in the blink of an eye age like 20 years, 10, 20 years. And it's something very, it's played almost creepy, and then it just becomes sad. And it's almost like you wish that it was just creepy. There's a point where the mom kind of says, she's complaining about her tinnitus, and then she says like a joke, like she says, "Run a fast train to hell," and then Jake gets mad, and then she says, "Sorry, run a fast train to heck." Yeah, and it's actually kind of a light moment, and in the laugh, she suddenly just starts kind of crying and weeping, and then the dad all of a sudden starts speaking as if she's already dead.
Yeah,
and you're seeing kind of this sort of weird. Kind of jumbled collage of Jake's memory of his parents growing older and dying before his eyes.
Yeah. Well, what I also find interesting about that part of the movie too is it's when, I guess if we're talking about the janitor, it's when his mind's interest kind of switches from the girl to his own life. Because up until then, he's very fixated on her thoughts and her opinions. But as soon as his parents start aging, it kind of becomes more about what he's feeling, I guess. And you see it on the car ride back from their parents. It's very like his emotions are extremely conflicting to watch. He's laughing, and then he's complaining, and then he's bashing like the steering wheel, and like it takes a very kind of dark turn after that.
Well, it's like he's having kind of a mental like internal conflict of basically whether or not he should continue living.
Yeah.
And he has all these very nostalgic moments, but this tinge of nostalgia also brings with it the fact that, you know, it's nostalgic for a reason. It's not there anymore.
Yeah.
You know, these bittersweet moments are gone.
Yeah, and it brings up this idea that we were talking about a while ago, about, and I'm sure a lot of other people do this, but before you're going to bed, trying to kind of start a dream in your head. And what can happen a lot of times is you might kind of get like the setting of where you are or who you're with, but very quickly your brain can start to just like get distracted on other things, and that's usually how we fall asleep. But in that movie, I think right around when his parents are aging, it's like that fantasy of the girls kind of disappearing and his own past and insecurities kind of start seeping in. That's just what his brain's latching onto at that point.
Yeah, there's almost like like two sort of characters that aren't technically physically present, but you sense them. There's this character that wants him to be alive, and there's this character that wants him to accept all of the ugly truths of his life, that his, you know, parents were kind of imperfect, that he was not as intelligent as he would like to be, that he was alone for most of his life, and that he grew up to be a janitor. And then even the failed art projects. That's an interesting and very sad kind of scene when she goes down and sees that he basically he seemed to really enjoy painting, but he failed at it. Yeah. And they use the basement. All the paintings are in the basement. And the basement's used as kind of like a symbol of the subconscious, and that he will not let this idealized woman go into the basement. Yeah. But you're seeing this kind of like he's fighting it constantly. And even at the very start of the movie, you can hear her thoughts, and she's going, I'm thinking of ending things. And the minute she says that in her head, Jake interrupts her. Yeah. And it's very unsettling because you can tell he's doing anything possible to kind of rid himself of these like suicidal ideations.
Well, maybe for a second you want to talk about the scratches on the door to the basement, because there's some very cool like interpretations of what that is.
Yeah, when they first arrive to Jake's parents' house, there's a dog, and that in itself is a pretty funny scene because the dog shows up and it's kind of cute. You go, oh, there's a dog, and it just keeps shaking its head, and it's partially kind of suggesting that Jake he can't really remember this part of his life very well. He doesn't really remember what the dog's face looks like. So in his imagination, it's constantly shaking his head. And that actually becomes a symbol of his frustration in trying to remember things, this kind of fading memory. And while they're waiting for the parents, they also come across the basement, and he tells the girl, I don't like the basement. Yeah. He's never liked the basement, and he really tells her to not go into it. And there's these weird scratches, but they're on the top of the door. Yeah. And like, what do you think
Well, I can't quite remember how I put it the first time, but yeah, there are these scratches on the top of the door, like the top left above the door handle. I'm like, even a tall person, you probably couldn't do something like that. It's kind of weird. And the door is also taped away. But I thought the scratches kind of served as a symbol of not knowing exactly what's causing you pain or sadness or anxiety or anything. And they kind of serve as like this, like, just like you don't really understand it, but you're kind of afraid of it as well, because there's scratches. That means something was like trying to get in there, or just trying to like do damage. But to me, it kind of shows like the unknown of what makes you not like you, I guess.
I'm almost wondering, because, I mean, if we're going to take the basement as his kind of subconscious, if it's, I mean, the fact that the scratches are on the outside of the door, that there seems to be some aggressive effort to get inside, like a struggle to get inside. Yeah. And, maybe that's that, if we're kind of thinking of this kind of bipolarity of this kind of will to live versus kind of will to die, that we do crave truth and self-knowledge, even if it's self-destructive. And this kind of, maybe he was struggling to avoid going into the basement at all costs, and at one time he had some sort of very serious battle and attempted to get in there, but this kind of bipolarity was tormenting him. And, maybe that's why we see these kind of violent scratches.
Yeah. The scratches definitely serve as like a warning or of like danger or of, I don't know, like just something about like what is in there is not like fun to look at. Mm-hmm. Like it just serves as like, you see scratches on something, you're like, I'm not going that way.
Well, when she goes in there, because she's told by the mother to go downstairs and clean this nightgown. And if this whole us talking about this movie just sounds really weird, I mean, the movie feels like a dream sequence. So it really like the plot's everywhere. None of this is. I'm not going to try to go into this like too much detail, but the mom asks the woman to go and clean the nightgown downstairs in a very aggressive manner, which is very interesting. And she says that Jake has more and more been wanting to kind of close himself off from the world and kind of at the same time control everything.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. But she goes into the basement, and when she puts the nightgown into the laundry, what comes out is the janitor's clothes. And then afterwards, she sees the paintings by Jake, which is likely another deep-seated insecurity that he doesn't want to confront, a reality he doesn't want to look at. And then she immediately gets another one of those phone calls that are very suicidal, and it's growing in aggression. So you're kind of seeing this, yes, you're finding the truth, but it's also incredibly self-destructive in a sense if you're not willing to brace for it.
Well, yeah, it kind of also brings up what we were talking about with birthdays of like entering that freedom. It can be very depressing just to think like, well, this is it, like this is what it is, but so yeah, I think it's like him kind of looking at those parts of himself, and then he immediately gets that phone call with the kind of cryptic suicidal message, and it's like, yeah, he sees what his life is, and it doesn't make him very happy.
Yeah, no, and that's, I mean, on the topic of regret, I think that's probably one of the biggest takeaways in the movie. This kind of, it's almost like Kaufman's kind of just giving us a very raw presentation of the human condition. And he even gets kind of, it almost sounds like Ernest Becker at a point when, and we should definitely talk about the pig, when she hears Jake telling her about the lambs that have died in the farm and the pig that in childhood he remembers his dad having to put down because it was infested with maggots.
Yeah.
And she goes on a little discussion, and as she's talking about this, it's a clip of the janitor walking through the high school. She says that humans are probably the only animals that have the capability to imagine their own death at any time, and that this has been such a painful skill or ability that humans have invented hope in order to kind of quell this terror. And that, in a way, I think really captures the movie. It's that this change, this acceptance of destruction and chaos and ugly things, and the fact that we can take wrong turns, we can end up as, and no offense to high school janitors out there, but we can end up as embedded in these professions that we found undesirable, that we can end up alone, and that all of this can happen seemingly in the blink of an eye. She talks about she doesn't see us moving through time, more so time moving through us.
Yeah.
Taking our heat away.
Well, and that idea of hope, it's evident throughout the movie, because even though Jake, the janitor, sees that this girl is obviously like there are some very sweet moments between the two characters, but for the most part, it's quite awkward. It's quite creepy. It can get quite dark. It just seems kind of uncomfortable. But he keeps pushing it. He keeps going through the fantasy. And it's like he's hoping that there will eventually be this like payoff, that it's like it makes sense for them to be together. He keeps pushing it.
Mm-hmm. And that's a very, I mean, it's sad, but that's a very, very valid kind of summary of kind of the main themes of the movie, is that it's really about this guy above all odds hoping for something, and finding his hope in the pop culture he consumes, finding his hope in these ideas in this like world of abstraction, and not coming to face the reality. And I think on that note, the ending is very interesting. It's he's dying from hypothermia, he quickly sees a very nostalgic advertisement of the ice cream store that he went to, that at this point it's established that he really has some sort of comfort with this ice cream brand. What's it called?
Tulsi Town.
And then there is the pig. It's animated and it's infested with maggots, and it is speaking to him in a very calm tone. And he tells the janitor to come with him, and he says, "What, someone's got to be a pig infested with maggots. It might as well be me." And he seems to be this kind of symbol of acceptance of the entropy and the destruction and the hopelessness of the universe. Mm-hmm. And it's almost a little bit Buddhist. It's a little bit like we can face this head on. This is reality. Reality is constantly changing.
Well, that pig is kind of is letting go of himself in a way. Like he's willing to take things for the universe, pretty much, or be a part of it, and just be like, you know what? Mm-hmm. Maggots aren't that bad.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, and it's I mean, it's when you're watching it the first time, you don't know what the hell's going on, but it is because you're watching the janitor who's now naked walking through the high school, and this animated pig is in front of him telling him it's not that bad. Yeah. And then he says, we should go get you dressed. And the janitor, to a certain extent, sounds like he's come to peace.
Yeah. You can hear like some like grunts of approval of what the pig's saying. Yeah.
And then that goes on to the very final scene, which is so weird. And it's him accepting a Nobel Peace Prize and recounting basically verbatim the speech from A Beautiful Mind.
Yeah.
And and every character that was on that movie is now in the audience, and they're wearing old person makeup, but they look young. So you're almost seeing like, it's like his final sort of artistic kind of explosion of hope and of all of the kind of fictional ideals that he sprung forth. And at the same time, him accepting the fact that it's over. Yeah. So it's like in his own language, kind of accepting everything for what it is. Mm-hmm. And he sings A Lonely Room from Oklahoma.
Yeah, which is all about a fantasy.
It's all about someone that has this big, wild dream about getting the girl of their dreams and finally being better than the slick cowhand, which he's basically talking about himself. And then waking up and realizing it was all a dream, which is pretty much the movie.
Yeah.
And this kind of final, I'm going to finally go out there and do that. But I think the sad part is that, in the end, it's kind of assumed that he's dead. Yeah. So you can take that as a warning, or you can take that as, maybe he finally found acceptance.
Yeah. Well, even sadder is this fantasy that's based on hope that consumes most of the movie. It's not like it's achievable. He's a janitor, and it's literally all he can do is fantasize to comfort himself. He can't do a lot, and it's just very sad to watch and feel.
Well, because it also makes you think, to what extent is it his fault? It's very easy to have the interpretation that, he just didn't do enough in his life. He didn't have the courage. Yeah. But to what extent is he just, his environment has beaten him down? And that's a very, very sad kind of, I guess, social take that, there's probably a lot of people born into poverty or into abusive families, or just circumstances that don't really provide any source of flourishing, and they in fact make people feel very insecure. And it's not because the environment is intentionally doing it. There's a lot of loving parents that just might be unintentionally kind of giving their own sort of afflictions and history and passing it on to their kids unknowingly. so it's kind of the struggle of, is there anyone to blame? Like, who's to blame, and would blaming even make any sense? And it goes back to that pig of just, we should just accept things to a certain extent, do what you can. But this is, if you do end up, basically the equivalent of a pig infested with maggots in this movie is you end up as a kind of obese high school janitor that's living a very lonely life. You kind of it's almost saying, like, this is what happened. You have to be, someone's got to be that, and it's you.
Well, and I think you're also seeing an example of what we were talking about earlier, when some people, as a kid, you're always going, like, you're waiting to grow up, you're waiting to become like an adult pretty much, and then kind of unknowingly you are an adult, and it's just like, but you still feel like you're kind of waiting for something. And I feel like watching Jake was like watching someone who got to an adult and didn't quite notice and just kept kind of hoping for things to pan out the way they wanted to as a kid, not knowing that they are in full control of what's happening. It's quite unfortunate.
Well, there's that part in the car ride where she says it's quite sad that everyone blames their mothers for everything. And he goes, like, to a certain extent, like, you could end up getting these things from your parents, and not everyone grows up in great households. And then she says, at a certain point, you have to take responsibility for yourself. And I mean, in the context of just two people talking, it's not that brilliant of a dialogue, but the fact that it's him coming up with this sort of dialogue in his head, I think a lot of people have dealt with that, do I blame my environment, and to what extent? And, is this really helping me in the long run?
Yeah. Well, yeah, because it does kind of form a fixation on the past, which, in my opinion, isn't the best way to go through your day-to-day life, thinking about what happened, what could have happened. Like, it's quite remarkable how much his past was, like, in him, like how much it affected his day-to-day actions in the moment.
Well, I mean, there's that quote by Sartre, which is, freedom is what you do with what's been done to you. And I think that's kind of maybe if there was a positive takeaway from this movie, is that you come to peace with your past, and you do what is possible.
Yeah.
You make do with it. I mean, the world's not going to hand you everything you want. And then at the same time, you shouldn't design your own world so you can just live in this kind of escapist fantasy.
Yeah.
Or else you could die naked following a pig infested with maggots in a high school.
Yeah.
I think that's the explicit conclusion.
After hallucinating your favorite ice cream brand's commercial.
I think that is the final interpretation of the movie.
Yeah.
Like all Charlie Kaufman movies, very, very simple.
Yeah, very clean cut.
But I mean, this goes on to kind of the biological of human beings. The fact that we are impermanent, the fact that our memory declines, our cognitive abilities fade.
Yeah.
And that kind of brings us to a piece that specifically deals with dementia.
Yeah. So there's this guy named the Caretaker. I apologize, I forget his full name, but he's been a musician for quite a few decades, which is pretty impressive, especially with the rapid change in music. But he is more on the experimental side. And he's created this project that is 6 stages. It's about 6.5 hours. It's called Everywhere at the End of Time. And essentially, stage by stage, you go deeper and deeper into the effects of dementia of someone going through that process. And it's quite the trip, I guess.
No, it's at the start, it's kind of pleasant to listen to, and then you kind of start to feel sort of dread, like there's something wrong, but you can't really pin exactly what it is. And it is supposed to match every single clinical stage of dementia. And that's exactly what the first stage is this kind of little things that you wouldn't normally forget are suddenly being forgotten. And you're kind of seeing this sort of slow decline.
Well, it's very intelligent to the genre of music he chooses for this project, because it's kind of this old big band like ballroom type music, and even people born in the 2000s for some reason get like a twinge of nostalgia when they hear that music, especially put through like a bunch of vintage effects. And the first stage is like, it's very nostalgic, it's very emotional, but it's not the same emotion as you get like in stage 4 or stage 5. But there are like little distortions in the recording, like little bits of static, or a note hangs a bit too long, or just something kind of strange, but it's not enough to make you like notice it fully, I guess. Your brain kind of passes it.
And and then it becomes gradually more and more disturbing. And I mean, I was reading the little summaries. I don't know if he wrote them or if it was someone that uploaded it, but it was something like the third stage is basically this sort of denial and this kind of effortful attempt to recapture these memories, but then it just leads them more into this kind of awareness that they actually can't remember anything.
Well, what's cool about I have no idea the type of processing, how he made it. It's truly like it's crazy. I suggest everyone at least check it out, listen to a bit of it. But yeah, in this third stage, it's kind of like this. It's pretty distorted. It's mostly vinyl, like crackle and like hums and stuff, like room tone. But there are these very long, drawn out notes from like these kind of ballroom dance songs, that it's like there's still a sense of melody and harmony, but it's slipping. But you keep waiting for those notes to come back. And then it eventually, stage 4, notes aren't really there. It's these long, like, disturbing groans, pretty much.
Well, it reminds me of the movie that we were talking about when the dad, as I said, they all of a sudden gain an age, and it's showing Jake's memory of watching them gain an age. The dad at one point has very obvious, I think, Lewy bodies, which is kind of like Alzheimer's. And it's very deeply disturbing to see him constantly forgetting exactly what he's saying, and they have to label things in the house. And he says, to be honest, I can't wait until I get to the point where I can't remember that I can't remember anything.
Oh, Jesus.
And there's... do you want to be aware of the fact that you actually can't remember anything? That there is probably this life you've lived with loved ones and people that you cared about and things that you've done that are meaningful. Do you actually want to continue living knowing that you know this, but you don't actually know it?
Well, something really cool about that is that in stage 5 to 6, you literally kind of forget that you're listening to something, and you get very wrapped up in your own head. And I noticed I started thinking thoughts I don't usually think, and going down these like holes I wouldn't usually go to, just because of the like effects of these the tones. And you literally get to a point, it's like you forget what you were doing, and it gets so like emotional, yet you don't really understand why. That it's like only after the album's done you realize like, oh, I was listening to something. Like it's like a very good simulation. Although I don't really know what dementia's like.
No, that is fair. Neither of us have experienced dementia.
Can't compare it.
I have heard once you hit around 20 years old, that's when your memory begins to suffer. But it's not the same. Okay. I'm sure. But I think that the two pieces we're talking about, they're kind of hitting on something very primal and something that isn't usually touched upon, because it's how we process the world around us. Mm-hmm. We are barely ever actually living in the moment, we are using our memories. And even when we're projecting into the future, our memories are mere predictors of uncertainties that we could come across. So there is something very deeply disturbing to kind of reach the point where you go, there might be one day where a loved one or I will suffer from severe memory loss. And then also there's the kind of more existential point of, am I really ever experiencing anything fully or in reality, or is everything I'm kind of experiencing just kind of mere constructions? Am I just projecting my cognition onto the world?
Yeah. Well, I was studying this thing recently. Sorry, I don't know how to pronounce this name. It's either Dr. Kahneman or Kahneman. I'm not sure. But he had this theory that there's the experiencing self and the remembering self. And the experiencing self is in the moment. And like when you're experiencing things, those are typically thought to last only like 3 seconds and they pass. Whereas like the remembering self are, you know, things that you remember. But it really made me think about how much of our day is spent in our own heads. And like, I mean, you see that one in the Caretakers Project, how you literally get into your own head after listening to something external. And also in This Is the End of Time, where it's all in his head. Or no, sorry, I'm thinking of ending things.
Yeah. No, it's there is something very kind of sad about that. And I mean, that album really, really captures the kind of tragedy, the kind of limitations of the human condition, that we are basically bound to our memories. I'm sure if you asked a lot of people, you could have the vacation of your lifetime. It'll be absolutely, you know, you could choose wherever you want to go with whoever you want to go with, limitless budget, but you will not remember it once it's done. I don't think a lot of people would want to do that because, and I think there was some study where it actually showed that a lot of people would, it was some sort of scenario like that, and a lot of people wouldn't take it just because, you know, we like to remember things. That's such a huge part of our existence is in memory.
Yeah, but I mean, that's one of the beautiful things about like meditation or mindfulness is it kind of presents to you the pleasure of being the experiencing self, of being in the moment. It presents that you don't have to like do things just so you remember them, so you can cling on to them when things are kind of sad or something. It shows that like you can kind of eliminate that altogether by being in the moment and just being there, I guess.
You know, Buddha got some things right.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like tree thing's kind of whack, though. I'm not sure.
What's the tree thing?
You just mobbed under a tree.
Oh, right.
I like meditation, but like food's chill as well.
Yeah. No, but it's a good point. It's we should try our best not to be bound by memories. There is a certain use for nostalgia. We obviously, I don't think, can function without this sort of cognitive simplification of the environment around us. But it has its own kind of faults and it has its own limitations like anything else.
Yeah. Also, just something I thought about with that study that I find kind of weird is people choosing not to go to something knowing that they could only experience it and not remember it. It just, like, it seems a little contradictory because I know a lot of people that when, like, something good is happening or they're with a bunch of people at, like, a party or a celebration, they get drunk and they often can't remember it. So, like, it's kind of, like, contradictory a little.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. A lot of people spend their youth completely blackout drunk and don't, I think that's a very famous Instagram caption, the best night I'll never remember or something like that. You know, and it's a bunch of, people at a nightclub just boozed up.
Yeah. But, like, it's funny because the excitement for that event is crazy. But if you're literally told you won't be able to remember it, it's funny to see that people are like, oh, no, I won't go.
Yeah. No, I think that's kind of a good way to wrap it up. The whole, some level of mindfulness and embrace of mindfulness, kind of being in the present, kind of, embracing that sort of pig infested with maggots mentality of, it's not all bad, and, the world is ever changing. Things are constantly evolving. And that does mean that it's going to come in conflict with our preconceptions, with our memories, with how we thought things were. And that's uncomfortable, but that's also necessary if you want to live, I think, an authentic and kind of fulfilling life.
Well, it's a very stoic approach to take that, because you're also, looking, for example, I forget where I read this, but like a stoic, if they were going to be sent to prison for doing a crime, would have the mindset of like, yes, I will go to prison, but I will be okay. Like I will be able, I will survive. Like as a living being, I will be okay. Maybe upset, but like, in terms of health and everything, like they're okay. And it's kind of just that pig with maggots. He's like obviously going through a lot of pain, but he's chill.
Yeah. At the end of the day, we're going through a lot of pain.
Yeah, but some of us are just chill.
Yeah, and some of us aren't. Some of us are.
Yeah.
Once again, great way to wrap it up. I think that's everything we covered. Those were some very complicated, heady things to kind of talk about off the top of the dome. But
yeah,
hopefully some of that was. You guys could understand some of that. I don't know. It was, especially if you hadn't seen the movie or listened to the music. I definitely recommend checking out I'm Thinking of Ending Things and listening to some of the Caretakers' work. Do you have anything else to add? Or?
Well, this came up when we were talking about the Caretaker. I forgot to add, but sorry for this little plug, but the the album I just released, there's a song called When Time Stops. And what the song essentially is it's 4 different songs kind of put together within 4 minutes. And what I tried to do is it's not so much represented through the lyrics, but with the momentum of the music. It's the, I guess, someone who's maybe on their deathbed or going through dementia, those very weird changes that just happen abruptly. So I don't know, check that out if you want a kind of minorly expressed version. But,
check out Housecat's music. Remember to subscribe, check out Ridge Wallet. That's everything. Thanks for listening.